Driven by Paul Pavier from Wigan MES, Frank Nixon's 5-inch gauge Duchess of Buccleuch represented Leyland Smee. The 462 Duchess was a notable engine in full size, and this well-presented example looked very imposing. Although hauling quite a modest load, the engine was in trouble from the very first beat, being on the point of stall, even using full gear, full regulator, and with the safety valves lifting. Paul had barely cleared the station when he dropped 2 passengers and tried again with no better result, even on a sanded track. At first it was thought that maybe a truck had derailed, but a check revealed no such problem, so Paul dropped off 3 more passengers and tried again. But the engine stalled again. Examination revealed the fault. Although non-operative, the engine brakes were made to close scale, and sand had been drawn up on the wheel treads to wedge between the brake shoes and wheels. A restart was agreed, the offending sand removed, the fire tended, a quick all-round check made, and Paul set off again with the same load on 3 cars. Success greeted his effort this time, but the engine sounded very offbeat, there seeming to be a blow from one piston. With the light load, Paul was able to lap speedily and consistently, but the engine seemed light on its feet, and he was shoveling a fair amount of coal onto a white-hot fire. The poor start preceded a fairly successful run.
My name's Paul Pavier. I'm a member of Leyland Model Engineer Society. This isn't my loco, it's built and owned by Mr. Frank Nixon, who kindly allowed us to run the loco in today's competition, which is one of my biggest aims was actually to run one of his engines at an IMLEC, and his aim was that we could have a faultless run. We achieved nearly enough everything, of all aim-wise. The only problem was that there was a lot of sand on the track, which is good to start off with, but the tight engineering, the brake shoes are so close to the wheels, it forced the wheels to slam shut. It made a break. Fortunately, given a rerun and all the sand was cleaned off, etc. And once we got started on our rerun, it was a faultless run. We had a small derailment with a tender. There was a twig on the track, I think, and the tender just popped off. But we started again without any problems. The engine's fantastic, in my opinion. I don't know about everybody else's.
Last to run on Saturday was Zebedee, an NG242 tank locomotive built by Ron Painter and driven by Mark Barnett. Somewhat different from the norm, it is fitted with 3 water feeds, injectors, a footplate hand pump, and on the running plate an impressive steam feed pump with modified porting to the Austin-Walton design. The idea was to build as economical an engine as possible, and making it simple to build and run. With a total load of 8 adults, Ron got off to a nice clean start and accelerated to a brisk pace. Apart from a short stop for a blow-up, the run was faultless. At the end of the first day, Fred Winsel's Gresley was in first place, with John Ellis and his Glen second. Jeff Moore was third with his Great Western 060 tank 1661. An early start was made, and Sunday's first competitor was a 3.5-inch gauge Britannia, owned and driven by Keith Morris from Rugeley MES. The engine is to the LBSC design, but with oversized cylinders. Keith started off with a load of 4 adults and 2 youngsters. He had a problem with sand clogging between the brake shoes, but after a reasonably clean start, he settled down to enjoy the run.
If I haven't already welcomed you here this morning, we welcome you here on this rather damp Sunday morning, the second day. Put that there.
After 28 minutes, he suddenly coasted to a stand out by Cowdrey Holt. It was thought that he was short of steam, but in fact the injectors were playing up and he couldn't get water into the boiler. Wisely, he dumped the fire and retired.
The loco's got two injectors on, one of which works at low pressures. This one works at high pressures. Once I got going and the pressure was up at working pressure, this little injector wouldn't pick up at all. So consequently I couldn't get water in the boiler. I don't know if you saw how many bottles that I picked up on the track. The pump itself, got an axle pump, but that won't in fact sustain it with a large load on it. Normally the loco performs really well, and it didn't really slip either, as I expected it to. We had a bit of a problem in the station where the sand actually compacted on the brake blocks. So it was difficult to get out of the station. But once I got going, it was running well. If you can't get water in, you can't keep going. Simple as that.
A well-engineered Buffalo in 3.5-inch gauge was a private entry from Brian Wilson. Designed by Martin Evans, this was a variant on the Caribou, the 080 American switcher. Buffalo has more of the Canadian look, with a 280 wheel arrangement, Baker valve gear, extended frames and a considerable overhang at the rear. With 9 on the train, including 2 youngsters, she slipped a little at the start before finding her feet and settling down to a nice steady run of lap after effortless lap, with a bright fire and a drying track. A brief pause resulted from derailment of the pony truck, but the fault was very quickly put right and the run continued without further incident.
I was a late entrant and I was cajoled to put in, but I'm glad I did. I was very nervous to start with, and I didn't think I'd ever start from the station, but once I got going, after about half time, I started to enjoy it a bit. Unfortunately, the engine derailed at one point. I had to stop, and that rather unnerved me, but we recovered. Anyway, I've enjoyed it, and I'm appreciative of the efforts of the club. If my wife sees me on telly with this hat on, she's going to never speak.
George Meldon from Urmston DMES is a first-time builder. His 5-inch gauge B1 was built to his own design, and he freely acknowledges the help and advice given by his fellow club members. To increase the size of the grate area, the boiler has a sloping backhead. With a load of 8 adults, once onto the sand, all traces of slip disappeared, and George settled down to a fast and trouble-free run. Although he had a couple of speed warnings, other than that, this was a well-controlled run.